I just feel like, who has the time? That is my honest opinion. Like, I keep seeing these videos of people saying like, oh, you shouldn't tell off your kids and say you can't do that. And like, to me, that just sounds bizarre.
Coucou my loves, and welcome back to the Jeune Maman Podcast channel. I'm your host Isatu, and today we're going to be doing part 2 of my parenting style series. In this episode, we'll be talking about gentle parenting and whether it's possible or productive in the Senegalese community. Now, if you haven't watched part 1, I highly recommend it because it is the foundation of parenting styles. I talk about the different parenting styles in that video, and I also talk about kind of how us as Senegalese-Americans, or just Senegalese people in general, most of us have probably grown up in authoritarian parenting styles and the impact that has had on us as adults. In this episode, like I mentioned, I'll be talking about gentle parenting specifically and whether that's conducive to parenting styles in the Senegalese community. Before we jump into the topic though, I wanted to show you guys a TikTok video that I came across where this lady was questioning whether gentle parenting was possible, whether it was effective. And so let me just show you guys that video and then we'll come back and talk about it.
I need to know what your guys' thoughts are on this whole gentle parenting thing. I just feel like, who has the time? That is my honest opinion. Like, I keep seeing these videos of people saying like, oh, you shouldn't tell off your kids and say you can't do that. And like, to me, that just sounds bizarre because, I mean, my mum was really strict on me, but I feel like I had a really great childhood. And, you know, she was really hot on my manners. She was really hot on me not watching TV all the time. She was really hot on me. If she had friends over, I just have to sit there and suck it up and just, you know, be polite and engage with like her friends, which I feel like is a really good thing. And yeah, I just feel like I'm constantly being targeted with this whole like gentle parenting approach, which, like, don't get me wrong, I think in an idealistic world, every parent would come to their child with patience and with calm, and, you know, obviously in an ideal situation that would be how every parent would choose to approach their children, like 24/7. But I just don't think it's realistic, especially for like mums and dads who are working, juggling multiple jobs maybe, have other children, have other responsibilities. And yeah, I don't know, I feel like my mum used to slap me on the wrist if I did something bad. Again, don't feel like I've like had any trauma from that. If anything, it just made me realise at the time, like, oh shit, shouldn't have done that. Didn't get that was really wrong, but now I do. Now I'm aware. But yeah, would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, because I feel like I'm going to still be working and have a lot on my plate. And especially when they get to that toddler phase, like, if they're just not listening, like, what are you supposed to do? I don't see how you can gentle parent your way out of these things. So yeah, that's my point of view. And I just don't necessarily feel like it's realistic. Like, obviously, if you have all the time in the world and you're one-on-one with your child every day and you don't have a job, obviously you have more time for patience. But yeah, I'd be really intrigued to see your point of view. But for me, I see myself being quite a strict parent, with boundaries and, yeah, clear things of like what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, because I want my kids to be well-rounded. I want them to understand discipline. I want them to understand boundaries and what's wrong and right. So I hope that doesn't make me a bad person.
So when I watched this video, I had a couple of takeaways. I got this general sense that the lady in the video talking kind of assumed that gentle parenting meant no boundaries. It means 100% patience with your child all the time, and that gentle parenting takes a laissez-faire attitude when it comes to parenting, where the kids are in the driver's seat and the parents are in the passenger seat or in the back seat in general. I'll get into this a little bit later in the video, but this was definitely something that caught my attention when she was talking. I also noticed that she talked about the toddler phase of parenting, where she basically said it's really impossible to gentle parent through that phase. And I'll get to that in a little bit as well in this video because I have my thoughts on parenting in the toddler phase, but that was another thing that caught my attention as she was talking. And really what I took away from what she was saying was that it's impossible to gentle parent through the toddler phase because toddlers are so rambunctious. They don't really understand boundaries. They're kind of just like in their own world. So how do you as a parent have enough discipline and patience to parent through that toddler phase? Finally, I noticed that she talked about gentle parenting and a very defeated attitude when it comes to working moms. So she basically said that if you're a working mom, you don't have time to gentle parent. If you're a stay-at-home mom, you have more time to do that. You have more patience to do that. And I don't really agree with this, so I'll just share my thoughts on it right now. I think it takes away from the stay-at-home mom to say that you have all the time in the world to gentle parent more than the working mom, because it kind of assumes that the stay-at-home mom doesn't have anything to do. And anybody who's a stay-at-home mom will tell you that there's a lot of work to do at the house. So you have a job on top of a job. So I didn't really like that she made that insinuation or kind of just called it out directly, that if you are a working mom, you don't have time to gentle parent. If you're a stay-at-home mom, you have more time. It implies that if you're a working mom, because you don't have the time, you're allowed to yell your way through parenthood and use more discipline or use more force when it comes to parenting your child versus a stay-at-home mom. And I really reject this notion a lot. So we'll talk about that more in the video, but those are my takeaways from this video. With that, let's get into the topic of the day. So one thing that we can all agree on is, as parents, our concern, our primary focus, our priority is to make sure that we raise our children in a way that they can be productive members of society, but we also provide them the love and nurture that they need to grow up to be healthy adults. In this video, I'm going to be exploring the pros and cons of gentle parenting, and like I mentioned earlier, if it is conducive to Senegalese style upbringing. So first, let's talk about the pros of gentle parenting and what it really encompasses. The first is emotional connection. So gentle parenting really harps on emotional connection between parent and child and about fostering a positive emotional connection. It preaches empathy and understanding and creating a safe environment for the child to be able to communicate their needs and their concerns with the parent, and for the parent to be receptive of those and appropriately respond, so that the child is getting their needs met, but the parent is also still in the driver's seat. The second aspect is positive discipline. Gentle parenting promotes positive discipline through modeling, redirection, and problem solving. So one thing that is really evident to me when it comes to gentle parenting is that it's about teamwork. It's not just that the parent gets to tell the child what to do all the time and the child just has to obey no matter what. It's really about creating an environment where the child can come to the parent with the concerns that they have, like I mentioned, in that emotional connection. And the emotional connection is really the base of that. If your child doesn't feel safe coming to you, it's going to be really hard to embody a spirit of positive disciplining. So when it comes to positive disciplining, it's through that modeling, so that leading by example. A key distinction here is that when it comes to positive discipline, gentle parenting promotes self-regulation. So instead of you forcing your child to act how you want them to, instead of you pushing your wants and your needs and your direction onto the child, it's about teaching them the valuable life skills that they need so that they can self-regulate and act in an appropriate way with or without you around. Another key aspect of gentle parenting is a respect for autonomy. So this is recognizing and acknowledging that your child is an individual and they have their own thoughts, their own desires, their own fears, and you as a parent respecting that. The next point is emotional intelligence. I know this is a buzzword we hear so much on social media and through reality shows, but emotional intelligence is another block in the layers of emotional intelligence. So this is really about allowing your child to grow up in a way that they are emotionally intelligent. And so I know we can't use a word to define the word, so I'm going to explain that a little bit better. This is about teaching your child to learn and manage their emotions into adulthood. It's about learning how to empathize with others and build resilience in the face of challenges. So it's really about preparing your child for what the world is out there and not you holding your hand throughout the entire process. And last but certainly not least, gentle parenting is about building lasting relationships with your children. There's a lot of people who grow up and resent their parents. They want nothing to do with them. And it's most likely because they didn't have the emotional connection, the positive discipline, the autonomy to feel like an individual, so that when they became an adult, they could actually have agency over themselves and still have a lasting relationship with their parents. So that's the last but most important component for me, because I know for a lot of us, it's about having healthy, lasting relationships with our parents, and that's the goal of this whole conversation. Now, I never said gentle parenting was easy, and we heard it from that lady in the TikTok video. So let's talk about some of the challenges of gentle parenting. The first one is that gentle parenting requires a lot of time and patience. This is not by any means an easy feat. It is probably the hardest part of gentle parenting, because sometimes as people, just as human beings ourselves, we have instincts, we have feelings, we have reflex that may cause us to just spring into action when something is going on, versus taking a step back and really engaging in some key things that can foster a healthy relationship with your child. So what are some of those key things? They involve active listening, problem solving, and guiding your children through life's challenges versus telling them what to do. I like to think that gentle parenting is about teaching your child how to fish so that, like I mentioned, whether you're around or you're not, they will still be a productive member of society. They will still be a healthy individual on their own. Another challenge to gentle parenting is a lack of external support. And I feel like this is one of those where even on social media, when you bring up gentle parenting, it's something that some people just have a knee-jerk reaction to, that no, you should not be gentle parenting. Kids need discipline. Kids need this. Kids need that. And so the external support, the lack of external support, I should say, it may be coming from your family, it may be coming from society at large. Some people just don't like the idea of parents kind of having a more collaborative relationship with their kids. They think that parents are the authority, parents are the ones who have the final say, parents are the ones who get to make all the decisions. And while I do agree with some aspects of that, I think as a parent, especially in those early years, your child needs you to be a guiding role model for them. But as they grow into adulthood, and that's really the crux of this conversation we're having, is as they grow into adulthood, you have to take on a bit of a different approach so that you can have productive conversations, you can have empathetic conversations, and maintain those lasting relationships that we talked about earlier. So you really have to go with the end in mind, like what do you want your relationship with your kids to look like in adulthood, and kind of work your way backwards when it comes to how you parent them. Because what you do in childhood is what's going to carry on into adulthood, and sometimes we can be so psychologically damaging, so emotionally damaging to our kids that by the time they reach adulthood, they want nothing to do with us. The next one, which is something that a lot of people assume is not a thing when it comes to gentle parenting, it is setting boundaries. So let me just be clear, in my opinion, I think that in gentle parenting, the parents are still in the driver's seat. The parents are still the major authority within the household. I don't reject that notion, but I think it's about setting clear boundaries, both for you and for the child. So the child can also set boundaries with you as a parent. And I know that's kind of unheard of in our society. It's like, if you're an introverted person, for example, you're not allowed to just retreat into your room because it's going to be seen a certain way in our society. You're not allowed to want to interact with house guests whenever they come to your house. You're not allowed to have opposing opinions when it comes to what the household believes. So some of these things may be ringing a bell, but if not, like, let me know in the comments what you guys think about this. But I know that in our society, this is something that I've heard a lot from people, that they don't feel like they can be an individual. We move in such a communal way that sometimes you just have to go with the herd, and you're not allowed to have your own thoughts, your own opinions, your own desires for how you want to live your life. So for me, this one is a really important one when it comes to setting boundaries. The parents, especially in those early years, setting positive boundaries, setting firm boundaries with the kids. But as they grow into adulthood, the parents also reversing the roles a little bit and understanding their children's boundaries that they may be setting upon them. So this is a very nuanced conversation I want us to have around this. I don't want it to be like black and white. I don't want anybody to be dense either and think that parents get to say whatever they want to do, or kids have to rebel 100% against their parents. We have to find a healthy medium here and have the conversation that's really going to push for progress and change versus just being super black and white about it. This next challenge is, I think, what the lady in the video was alluding to, which is tantrums and challenges. So in those early years, especially the toddler years, we all have heard of the terrible twos. There's a reason why they call it terrible twos. At that age, and just the toddler phase in general, I would say up until like 5-6 years old, when the child is able to really understand what you're saying to them, it can be really hard to gentle parent. It can be really hard to get some messages across, to set boundaries, because kids will push those boundaries, not because they want to be defiant, but because they don't understand. They don't really know exactly what they're doing. So as a parent, that's why the time and patience really come into play here, because as a child, they're not really going to be able to receive everything that you're giving them. So you have to have that time and the patience to really help them understand what you're trying to say, really get them to understand, like, what's the bigger picture in all of this. Like, I'm not saying no just for the sake of saying no. Here's why. Oftentimes it's for their own security, for their own safety. So really having that collaborative spirit and understanding your child first, understanding how they react and respond to your information, but also just working with them on their level. I think it's also really important to talk about with this point that sometimes we like to dismiss how a child may be behaving and chuck it up to some disorder. I feel like that's a really big phenomenon now where it's like, oh, my child has ADHD or my child has this or that. So I always just wonder, is it because maybe the child isn't getting enough attention? If the parenting style were different, would the child be acting differently? And I, of course, don't want to invalidate anyone's experience out there and say like, oh, no, you don't have ADHD. No, sometimes that really is what it is. But I just can't help but wonder, if the parenting style plays a major role in how the child is acting, is it a chicken and the egg? Is the child acting that way because of the parenting style? Or is the parent's parenting style a reaction of how the child is acting? I don't know if what I'm saying is making sense, but I hope it does. And then the last one, which is probably the most pertinent to this conversation, is cultural and generational differences. We all know if we probably brought up gentle parenting to our parents right now or our grandparents, they would be like, what? No. A lot of people have that knee-jerk reaction that I mentioned to gentle parenting because of the cultural and generational differences. Across the world, you will see that some parenting styles may be more prevalent in certain parts of the world versus others. And so a lot of people think gentle parenting is a Western phenomenon, but I know quite a number of Senegalese people who would say they grew up in a gentle parenting fashion, and it led to them having much more healthy relationships with their parents as they grew into adulthood. If you are now having kids and you decide to use the gentle parenting approach, you may have that lack of external support that I mentioned earlier because of cultural and generational differences. So just be mindful of it. Really, you have to make the best decision for you and your family, but I wanted to bring these pros and cons to you guys just to lay it out there so we can have a really in-depth conversation around gentle parenting styles in general, and how we feel like how we were parented affected us into adulthood and how we would like to move forward with our own children. Now, I know in the last point around the cons and the challenges, I touched on the cultural differences, but I wanted to bring my own. That was based on research. I wanted to bring my own just opinions, and some things came to mind when it comes to the Senegalese society and how we like to parent. And the first one is that the parents are the rock and the kids are the egg. So in Wolof, they say, "Waju doj la, doom nen la. Bo dalee si kawam dangay toj, bo dalee sa kaw dangay toj." All that to say, the parent is a rock and the child is the egg. If the egg hits the rock, it's gonna crack. If the rock hits the egg, it's gonna crack as well. So it's really a lose-lose situation for kids in that scenario, where basically you don't really have much to say. You don't have any rights. You need to just do what your parents want. You need your parents' blessing for you to have a successful life. And that can be used as emotional blackmail for a lot of kids, because they feel like if they go against anything their parents want, then automatically they're doomed. I think this is a combative and antagonistic approach that really pits parents against their kids, which shouldn't be the goal of parenthood, right? Going back to the lasting relationships, you want to have good relationships with your kids. You want to have good relationships with your parents. And so why do we like to pit parents against their kids and saying that if the kid doesn't obey the parent by all means, then they're going to be doomed for life. They're not going to be successful. Nothing they do is ever going to be blessed. I don't think that's healthy. I think that's very emotionally manipulative. And so I just wanted to bring that up because this is, to me, the complete opposite of what you want your relationship with your kids to look like. You don't want them to feel like they're forever indebted to you, in the sense that they can't make any decisions on their own, or they feel guilty about any decisions that they may make as adults. And it just really seems like there is no middle ground. Like, is it a hard-boiled egg or a regular egg? Like, what are we talking about here? So this was just something that was interesting to me that I wanted to bring up. And now I'm going to talk about the second point that I think is important for us to talk about. This next one is something that we say a lot in our language. Khale hamudara, kids don't know anything. And I think this is just so insulting to the kids' intelligence. I have a 15-month-old right now, and the things that she knows just based off her age alone, I'm not saying that she's a genius, she's an Einstein. No, I'm just saying, just watching her, she's very much aware of the things that we do within the house. If she sees you using something a certain way, you'll see her later pick it up and try to use it the same way that you did. If I'm doing my hair and I have supplies around me, she'll take it and put it up to her head. So kids know things, kids see things, and kids ingest a lot. They absorb a lot of information from those around them. And I think to chuck it up to hala hamudara, kids don't know anything, it's so detrimental. And they're not saying it as just like something they throw in the wind. No, it's something that is practiced. It's like, you can't make decisions for yourself because you don't have any experience. You can't do anything because you don't know. I can see things far into the future that you may not be able to see. So there's really no middle ground, again, when it comes to what the child may actually have in terms of insight that they can bring to a conversation versus what the adult assumes that they already know just because they've been around longer. And I think in this age, it's something that we have to be mindful of because we're in the age of technology. So kids actually know a lot more than we probably want them to, earlier than we want them to know it. So we have to keep that in mind as parents if you want to have realistic conversations and realistic relationships with our kids, that they may actually be knowing a lot more than we do in different aspects of life. So you may have more life experience because you've been around longer, but in some aspects, maybe they know a little bit more than you do. And I think as parents, we have to be open and willing to hear our kids out so that we can all make informed decisions together as a team. And then the last point that I wanted to touch on is the irony of boundaries. So it seems like in Senegalese households, there's a lot of boundaries actually when it comes to what you can do towards your parents. But when it's the other way around, there's no boundaries. Like there's nothing your parents can't do to you or can't say to you because you're supposed to take it. Does not matter how you feel about it. Doesn't matter what impact it has on you. So I think for me, the irony of boundaries was something that just piqued my interest a little bit. And I'm probably going to do a little bit more research on it for my own interest, because it's just like, for me, I really think that kids' boundaries are not respected very much in society at large, but especially in Senegalese society, which is what I've been privy to my whole life, is like kids don't need to have boundaries. They don't need privacy. They don't need their own time. Going back to the introverted kid here. So think about what boundaries they may be able to set. Probably none, because they're expected to be extroverted. They're expected to act the same way that everybody else around them might be acting. So there's no nuance. There's no grace given to kids who may be a little bit different. And I think when you have multiple kids, especially, and you notice that one of your children may need a little bit more time or a little bit more understanding when it comes to certain things, you have to understand that boundaries come into play here. And I think especially when we talk about having open relationships with our kids so that we can talk about anything, think about if you set up a virtual boundary of, if you tell me something, you're going to get in trouble for it and I'm going to punish you for it. That's going to push your child away from having that open conversation with you. So eventually you end up knowing less about your child. Some kids can probably swear up and down their parents do not know who they are, because for a very long time, growing up in a household where respect was the primary thing that needed to be attained, there weren't honest conversations. There wasn't transparency. There wasn't vulnerability. So you may have a child live with you up until the age of 25, 30 years old, and you don't know who that child is. Conversely, you may not know who your parent is because there's so much taboo. There's so many things that we don't talk about with our kids that I think there's a lot that could be said for having more open dialogue where we understand our parents a little bit better. They have their own truths, their own experiences that they've gone through. And if they shared that with us, we would understand them a little bit better. And it would open the door for us to also share who we are as people, so that growing up, we're not just two strangers living in a house thinking we know each other, but not really. All right, so wrapping up this episode, I wanted to just kind of put a bow on it and say that there is no one parenting style that is correct all the time. I think you can have different parenting styles for different kids. I think you can have different parenting styles for different phases of life as well. There is no good or bad. It is just different, and you have to have discernment, and you have to have the willpower and the desire to want to have a healthy relationship, whatever that looks like for you. Gentle parenting is not easy, no matter how you look at it. It does require a lot of patience, a lot of effort, a lot of time, and a lot of redirection within yourself. So you may be gentle parenting one way today and gentle parenting a different way tomorrow. So like I mentioned, it is not a one size fits all solution. Really encouraging you guys to just do some introspection. Think about how you were raised. How do you want to raise your kids? What impact do you want to have on the world? And what kind of relationship do you want to have with your kids when they are adults? I think so many people forego that. They think that as long as they feed you, put a roof over your head, put some clothes on your back, and send you to school, that the job is done as a parent. But I think we're getting to a point now where a lot of people are being more critical of the relationships that they have with their parents. And a lot of people are actually kind of shying away from being close to their parents because they're so traumatized by things that they've gone through in the past. And we can't roll back the clock, so we can't sit here and change what's been done already. But I think we can do work to recognize the good, the bad, and the ugly, and make wiser decisions going forward so that we are the best versions of ourselves, not only for us, but for our future kids as well. So that's what I had for you guys in terms of today's episode when it comes to gentle parenting. I would love to know what you guys think. Do you think gentle parenting is completely ridiculous? Do you think that it's more nuanced than the conversation being had online? Do you think this episode was helpful? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Let me know if you think gentle parenting is productive, conducive, or even realistic in Senegalese society. I would love to know what you guys think about that topic. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.